Nothing. Well, she said this. I wanted to post quote, well, we've conditioned these kids for 5 years to think they're trans, so 90% of those conditioned kids stay conditioned. Yeah.
90% of kids after 5 years who socially transition continue with gender affirming care.
Yes, because you've led them down this road, and whatever issue they were having, you have given them a solution. It's called the placebo effect. It's called being immature. It's called wanting to be accepted. I mean, like, this correlation is not causation. And the fact that, like, what kind of stat is that? 90% of the people who start doing a thing but don't actually do the thing end up wanting to do the thing. What does that mean? That means literally nothing.
The very small amount who return to their birth gender or whatever that they were assigned at birth,
it's not a small number, which you would know if you weren't trying to toe the line. If you actually read your boy Jesse's articles, maybe you would know this.
It's like something like 3-ish%, and there's no real surgery involved there. That's usually kids.
The entire trans community is only 1%. But like 3%, it's just like 3%.
Under the age of 10, before hormone therapy has even started. So my coverage of trans issues is proportionate to the amount of kids that are actually transitioning and happy with their transition. For me, I think that that's my responsibility as opposed to focusing on edge cases, because I'm not a journalist in the same way that somebody writing for the Washington Post or the New York Times is.
I mean, you definitely have a lot in common, but I agree that you definitely are not a journalist.
I'm somebody that is covering what I think is important, and its emphasis and the emphasis that I choose to focus on is hopefully aligned with the proportionality of the problem.
And I think that's
and again, she just said nothing. Nothing. Well, she said this. I wanted to post quote, well, we've conditioned these kids for 5 years to think they're trans, so 90% of those conditioned kids stay conditioned. Yeah. No shit. That is not surprising. Like, to think about those 10%, and it's like you're just okay with them ruining their lives as children. As children. Because again, what are you saying? If we're starting to socially transition kids as they're little, in elementary school, then 5 years later, if we're using this stat, of course they're going to still be conditioned. And if we're using that as a reason that they should then go ahead with surgery, you're putting the cart before the horse. You're putting the cart before the host. Unwanted Bo is not feeling Emma. Yeah, right. Well, and that's a good question. They do keep tabs, but it's all self-reported. So if you're already a delusional person, then why should I believe anything that you say? Like, how do you know that the attention that you're getting from your new trans community is not what keeps you happy? I'm not saying it is, but how do you know that it's not? You know what I'm saying? Assigned at birth is not an intellectually honest statement. Agreed. Dr. Evil Genius says, when you live in a society that says boys are bad and girls are good, why would you expect to see large groups of males looking to go back? Take away hate for boys and men and see what happens. Fuck yeah. I mean, granted, we do see, my concern is more with the children. I understand you're talking about, most of the people who transition later in life are men, and it's very obvious that society is hostile towards men. So all you got to do is trans yourself, and now you're in a protected class, and all the patriarchy, I'm so oppressed, and blah, 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 blah. Take away hate for boys and men and see what happens. Great comment. Shout out to Ian Hartman. Welcome to the party. Said, born this way isn't one either. Can you elaborate? I was born this way. When I was born, I had a dick. And balls. I think that means I was born that way, no?
super fair, and I would agree, and I would say the same thing. I don't generally cover a lot of DeSister stuff too. I don't even really like talking to DeSisters, which I think is fair for a variety of reasons. But the issue here isn't what you choose to cover. The issue is deriding somebody else as transphobic because they want to cover it. And we can say until we're blue in the face that, oh, well, the data points in one direction, and like clearly all of these people are completely wrong. But then you look across Europe where they have stopped some of these trans treatments.
Which again, remember that that David was not willing to accept that these countries have stopped doing it. And now King Lefty Destiny just said it.
And then you look at in the United States, there are some stories that come up that are questionable. And people in the United States, especially parents, will look at these stories and they'll go, okay, well, people on the left say that it's all fake. A whole bunch of people seem to be disagreeing. And the only people that want to have these conversations are people on the right. On the left, you can't even talk about it because people like you will say, oh, well, those people are transphobic.
So based. That is exactly right. That is the perfect diagnosis of the situation. And so when we still have an issue, because like Xander is saying, that it's crazy that we should even have to be thinking about this. And when this is the issue, then yeah, you're damn right we're still going to talk about it. You're damn right we're still going to talk about it. So if we're talking about it and you are not willing to talk about it, then like, it kind of makes sense that we want to be like, so you still don't have an answer? So you still don't have an answer? You have an answer yet? No, it's still just, kids know that whatever they say is like, come on, bro. What are we doing? Destiny calling out the witch. Yeah, I told you. He's going to be the conservative on the panel.
I think we've touched on something really important here, which is the difference between a willingness to critically examine a subject and engage with certain people on said subject. So I firmly believe that no topic should be off the table when it comes to debating or arguing or discussing its potential virtues. I think that that's always valid. I don't see this as much today, but there was a period of time during the prominence of the alt-right where you would, if you had any opinion online for any length of time, you would be thrown without your consent into a debate about race science. It's still to an extent true on Twitter these days.
Put in one in the chat if you've ever had a discussion on Twitter about race science.
No, thankfully, it seems less so. Maybe it'll come back in style. I don't know. I think that when it comes to issues like race and criminology, well, I have a background in criminology. You have to get into it, right? On an academic level, you can't ignore it or turn your head from it. Lots of interesting stuff there. Valid conclusions to derive. But sometimes when the folks who want to talk about it are very obviously and persistently acting in bad faith, the question is to what extent can you engage?
Shout out to Trey Williams. Welcome to the party. Okay, so I'm seeing a trend so far, but just 2 data points. I'm just saying. Welcome to the party, brother. Wanted Poe said Vaush will give an out, saying it's not worth engaging with the right about it. Just watch. All right, we got a prediction. Let's see if you got it.
And that's the critical difference. I see lots of folks on the left who just plain don't want to talk about some subjects, and I think that's lazy. I think that if nothing else, they have to be engaged with in the abstract. And on the other hand, of course, there is a massive right-wing grift circuit of people who have been proven wrong 5,000 times on every conceivable issue.
Such as... Oh, you mean when... No, nobody of any legitimacy, unless you guys know what he's talking about. Me neither. Zippy said race science, the things the socialists think of next. Well, I mean, we do have 2 in the audience right now who have had this discussion, but that's 2 out of 12, and I have not. So, I'm just saying it's not a right-wing thing. That's not what we're talking about. Any film saying, yeah, that's not a thing. Classic leftist tactic. All right, well, this somebody, I think, all right, so Dr. Evil Genius is going to ask if anybody wants to reply to that. It says, race science is usually used in exchanges to attempt to get me angry and pull me out of myself so they can confirm their bias. Okay, and that's certainly, that's not, I guess it's hard to tell what the actual political leanings of the person are unless you're specifically talking about an issue, but I definitely think that when this makes a lot of sense to me. It's not that it's some conservative that's like, oh, I just have to talk about race science because it's so important that we understand this. It's a troll tool. And that's a very, 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 very different thing. It's not, I'm not excusing it at all. I'm just saying it's very different than there being a huge swath of people who are just dying to talk about race science. Dr. Genius said the attempts always fail. That's right. That's right. You stay above the bullshit. Ian said most discussions about race aren't honest about race. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think I agree with that a lot. Zippy says anyone who uses race science are crazy beyond all logic and reason. I mean, I don't really know what is meant specifically by race science. What is race science? When we say, yeah, exactly. Like what? I don't even know what that means. Like I'm thinking maybe like either eugenics or like the, who was it? I forget. Was it, I can't remember the name, but the guy who, charted IQ with races and all that stuff. Like, I guess if that's a thing that people are talking about. But, even Trey, who's saying I've experienced it. Don't even know if we're talking about the same thing. If race science is what I think it means, then he's basically used to say that some races are naturally dumb or violent. Yeah. And I mean, so what about you, Trey? Have you had people so you and I have had discussions about, different races and stuff like that. I would hope you'd think that I'm not, baiting with race science or anything like that. But when you put the one to say that you've experienced this, is it more situations like Dr. Evil Genius was talking about, where it's somebody just trying to troll you because it's Twitter, or is it someone who is generally interested in talking about and proving that black people are dumber than and Asians are smarter but whites are still the best because blah, 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 blah. Because if it's the trolling, again, I'm not at all saying that it's okay, but it's a very different thing than saying that conservatives in general just want to talk about race science. That's just no. Genetic well, yeah. But I was trying to think about like the who was the scientist who was plotting all of that stuff. I don't care enough to look it up because who cares? Indian Jesus, the race Scientologist. There you go. Multiple Media said it's naturally in a vacuum for humans to be dumb and violent. Unfortunately. So let's see. He's talking about these conservatives that everybody listens to that have been proven wrong over and over and over.
Massive right-wing grift circuit of people who have been proven wrong 5,000 times on every conceivable issue. Like Ben Shapiro consistently gets...
So now we have an example. So we have Ben Shapiro, who is... I mean, I don't know that he's right about every single thing, but he certainly has not been proven wrong time and time again. It may have been brought to your attention that your opinion is different than his, but that is a very different thing than him being wrong. Words matter. Xander said, funny thing is that race is actually a thing that's a spectrum and not gender. True. Across all lands, there are light-skinned people and dark-skinned people, even within the same cultures and within borders. Well said. Charles Murray, thank you. Yes, that is what I was looking for. Thank you, Ian. Yeah, so, I mean, again, are you encountering people who are like, hey, you're a black person, I want to talk about Charles Murray's work? Or is it the trolling kind? Infam said there is one human race. Sorry. What they want to talk about is ethnicity and heritage. Skin tone is as important as hair color. Exactly. Well said, sir.
Owned on the same talking points regarding trans people, but he's been repeating the same ones for 7 years now.
Yeah, because that's called consistency. That's called having principles and sticking to them. Again, you may disagree, but that's not being proven wrong.
Unchanging, not reflecting any shifts in the national dialogue because it doesn't matter whether...
you don't actually have a reason, because he's a religious person and bases his principles on a religion that is far older than any of the stuff that's going on today. And I mean, I'll be the first one as an atheist to tell you that is not a good way to think. But if it's brought you to the right decision, or it's brought you to the right position, why would you change that? If it is in line with everything else that allows you, at least in your own mind, to to be happy and successful and have a family and a community. How is that being wrong? Why would you expect that to change? If it's something specific that we have a factoid that he was saying, this is 7 people, but it's actually 10 people. Well, okay, then that's different. But you said proven wrong over and over and over and over and over and over. When has that happened? So Trey said both trolling, but I think they do truly believe it. Guys like Nick Fuentes come to mind as a notable example, and I agree with you. And think about, so does anybody object to the comparison that in terms of not specific topics, but just the level of extreme? Would we say, would anybody push back against the idea that in the level of extremism that Nick Fuentes and Vaush are kind of on the same level of extreme? They're in very different areas, but in terms of distance from the center, I think both of those are pretty extreme. Now think about the reception that a person like Vaush has versus the reception of a person like Nick Fuentes. The right, anybody who is not a fan of Nick Fuentes thinks he's a fucking joke. Because he is a fucking joke. But Vaush here is sitting on a panel and he's worse. Yeah, and he's supported by the algorithm. Exactly. And most of us here are seem to kind of align when it comes to these culture war issues to be on the conservative side, even if you are not a conservative yourself. That's the point, is that nobody here, does anybody here take Nick Fuentes seriously? So again, this is not about comparing, but it's about understanding their mindset. In their mind, Nick Fuentes is somebody that everybody on the right would love, and they're just too scared to say all the racist things that they want to say. No, not at all. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that clip, check out the full live stream link in the bio and catch me live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. See you there.